the fact that Phillips O'Brien, the Professor of Strategic Studies at the University of St Andrews and a regular helper on this programme's decision to write an article under the headline, "Why is Europe staying in an abusive relationship?" seemed particularly pertinent. And Phillips joins me now. So for people who haven't had the benefit of reading your Substack, Phillips, what is the thesis here?
Well, I mean, it's like people forget the last 3 to 4 weeks even happened, James. We have seen in the last 3 to 4 weeks, Trump basically side with Putin in the UN, talk about that Putin is a great friend with whom he can do deals, start to strengthen the diplomatic relationship with Russia, call Zelensky a dictator, send J.D. Vance to Europe to basically tell Europeans to elect far-right populists in Germany. Trump, doing everything he can to sort of humiliate Europe, show how weak it is, and try to build up Russia. Then, he has a press conference. Oh, it's all great. He's gonna, but he gives nothing. He gives absolutely nothing in these press conferences. Oh yeah, we'll have a great trade deal with Britain. Well, where's that trade deal? We've been hearing about a trade deal for years. Do you think there's a trade deal that's about to come roaring down the pike? I don't think so. By the way, I don't think the reality is he threatened Europe with tariffs yesterday. So it's just like he just abuses European states constantly, throws them the occasional crumb, and they all say, "Oh, great, I've gotten through to him."
Well, even more so, of course, is that the win is the fact that you didn't get abused.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically you really, he's going to change now. It's the classical thing, fear.
Yes.
Why do people stay in abusive relationships? It's fear. You get basically sensitized to the abuse.
You break this down. Sorry to interrupt, but we've got perhaps more time than you realise, and I'm interested in digging into this a little deeper because you kind of launched your own sort of investigation into the parallels, and you identify the 4 areas that explain why people do remain in abusive relationships. And yes, the first one is fear. And we missed the fact that, either on their own behalf or on behalf of what would happen in Ukraine, Macron and Starmer this week demonstrated fear of Donald Trump.
Well, what they did is basically say, we cannot live without you. That's the fear. We are actually so weak on our own. We can't possibly help Ukraine without you. We can't, which is on the surface bonkers. Europe is 20 times richer than Russia. It actually spends $300 billion on defense. If Europe wanted to get its act together, it could make a massive difference. It doesn't actually need the United States. It's just gotten used to the United States doing everything for it, and it's terrified to start thinking and acting on its own.
Someone on the program described it this week as pressing snooze on the alarm. We've been pressing snooze for years, but at some point we're going to have to heed the alarm. The new German Chancellor, perhaps, has gone much further than Macron or Starmer on recognising the need for a truly new settlement.
What he said was quite remarkable.
Yes.
I think what we got to see with it's always saying things, not followed up in actions. He talked about Europe achieving independence from the United States, whether NATO would even exist in its present form this summer, all of these things. And then that's good. But Macron was saying a year ago that Europe had to step up and Europe really needed to do these things. And what we've seen in actual terms from the UK, France, and Germany is still very limited.
Yeah. So, you've nailed fear. We'd already discussed normalized abuse, the way in which it becomes, people forget what a healthy relationship looks like, and you endure such abuse that just getting a day off feels like a win, which both Macron and Starmer potentially demonstrated this week. The third factor among circumstances that survivors cite as explaining why they remain in abusive relationships is shame.
Shame, and basically Europe is ashamed of what it's become. And that, I really think deep down, and they don't want to admit what they've become because they're not actually changing.
And it's a little bit more nuanced than that, because it wasn't that shameful when you had a normal incumbent in the White House. It's only now that you recognise what you've become when the person that you're, quotes, married to, end quotes, reveals their true colours, in this case.
And the shame is you should have seen this coming, too.
Bingo, yes.
I mean, I think actually I've been screaming about this for a year in different media, saying Europe has to get ready for Trump. He doesn't like Europe. He doesn't like NATO. And oh, no, we'll find a way to work. And it was all nonsense. And now they're stuck because no one had the courage to honestly admit what was coming down the pike. And it's here. And that's the shame.
Plan B, isn't it? And there wasn't one.
Nope.
And then, actually, before we move on to the fourth element of this equation, why does he have such a problem with Europe and NATO?
He just, in many ways, he just doesn't like, he likes Russia. That's the thing. We have to start, well, what does he like? He likes Putin. He wants to work with Russia. He looks at the world in a bilateral zero-sum game. And in his mind, well, Europe doesn't spend on defense. We spend on defense. Therefore, Europe makes money out of us. He's completely unable to comprehend leading an alliance and the enormous strategic benefits the United States gets from leading that alliance. So in his mind, basically, Europe is a bunch of welfare scroungers, if you were going to read the tabloid press, and that don't carry their weight, and it's all America. But he doesn't have any empathy. He doesn't have empathy much as an individual, I think, but he certainly has no empathy for the historical relationship between the U.S. and Europe.
And then finally, the intimidation, which again we touched on, but in specific terms, you'd point at Ukraine being threatened, wouldn't you? I mean, this is extortion. This is racketeering.
It was astonishing. It's changed, by the way, the money was always given as a grant, and it wasn't money. It was old military equipment, which the U.S. then replaced at much better for itself and made money. So it's sort of like if I gave you, James, my old crappy car, and then bought myself a completely new one, and then tried to charge you double for the new car. That's sort of what he's doing, okay? He handed over old equipment, bought himself new equipment, but now wants you to pay double the price for the new equipment. It's really just dishonorable, shady business, and it's, the mafia state. I'm going to make, he even said at one point, Zelensky has no cards. It's like, I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. Yeah. It's typical sort of bullying tactics, but that's what Europe is now faced with.
Nice country you got there. Be a shame if something happened to it.
Yeah, hey, you're going to have to give up some of it. We're all reasonable people here. That's the kind of language they're using. Might makes right.
You're not wrong. And yet, and this is where our show was a little earlier today, and yet in the moment of that meeting, what else could Keir Starmer have done?
First of all, he shouldn't have gone over there saying we cannot live without America. Yeah, that actually is catastrophic. Oh, we can't possibly defend Ukraine without you, because that just gives Trump all the leverage. So that's one. Secondly, and I know this is so hard for British politicians, they have to make common cause with Europe. This is disastrous if you go, oh, we'll get a trade deal while he screws Europe. Do you think, by the way, Europe's going to let Britain get away with this? That Trump's going to bring big tariffs on Europe and Britain's going to sail scot-free. Europe has to coordinate itself with its European partners more than ever, because what Trump is actually trying to do is drive them apart. So the whole idea, I think, of what they were doing is back to this, let's try and find the last vestiges of the special relationship, which do not exist. And so I would have changed the whole tone. I would have been more formal. As always with Trump, he actually backs down a little bit if he's confronted with opposition, like the Ukrainians turning down the first mineral deal. I think actually I would have been less accommodating to him, but that's just not the way European leaders are programmed right now.
And finally, Phillips, I understand exactly what you've said and the comparison in resources between Europe and Russia. But I mean, in the short term, can Europe really cope without America's military might? Can Ukraine really be looked after without American involvement?
Would not be the same. I mean, it's not that Europe can replace what America brings to the table, but Europe has the resources to do a great deal more than it has been, and it could provide things with UAVs that Ukraine desperately needs. So it wouldn't replace the United States, but it would be able to help a great deal more than it is.
And because Trump is an abusive partner, the diminished but still feasible European exclusive effort would be preferable to still relying upon the man who might turn around and beat you up again tomorrow.
He actually, I mean, he's doing the typical thing on Ukraine.
Yeah.
There's no more aid that he's asking for. In this mineral deal, there's no aid, there's no security guarantees. He's asked for no more aid for Ukraine. And yet Europeans are somehow trying to appease him when it comes to helping Ukraine. He's already made it clear there's no more things coming right now.